bersamamu bahu, jadikanku bejanamu. Sup? Bang, cara setting grafik biar gitu gimana? Gue main di laptop, setelan paling bawah gak kayak gitu. Pakai Nvidia Inspector bang. Nvidia Inspector, ntar lu bisa Discord gue bisa kasih file. Tinggal diaktifin dong. Kapas enaknya jual apa sih men? Jual. Cuma disimpan. Ntar harga tiba-tiba turun aja. Rugi. Download yang namanya Nvidia Inspector. Ntar kamu message aku di Discord aja, aku kasih file. Tinggal di double klik. Jangan join Discord aku, add aja di Discord namanya Minnesota. Nama kayak family name. Kalau buat soft rank nggak tahu ya. Soft rank gue pakai Black Star. Gue udah siap kan, mana tuh? Tuh gue udah siap tuh Black Star. Gue nggak pakai kapras soalnya. Aku cuma punya 3. Kalau gitu kamu simpen buat ini, buat soft rank. Berarti bos gear C20 pas 20.000 kapras. Bos gear C20 tambah Black Star tambah 20.000 kapras. Sakit juga 50 ya, begitulah. Makanya sih paling gampang dan menurut gue mungkin paling efisien pakai Black Star. Cuma kan ya itu kan pilihan orang. Kalau lo mau yang dari bos gear ya terserah. BD udah berapa lama? 6 tahun nih. Iya 6 tahun. 5-6 tahun. Bang, terus gimana? Kamu udah add aku di Discord bom? Ya aku kasih file. Bias berapa ini? 769 ya. 769. Lagi progres buat ke top pen Holland. Lagi nabung. Sekarang udah pergi ke 17. First devour in 30 minutes. Lama, gila. Udah tes 10 udah lengkap. Sudah. Semua treasure sudah kecuali treasure laut. Bacaan ring, kompas, map, teleskop udah. Arsipnya semua ada di YouTube sih. Karena setiap hari aku streaming grinding. Udah deh mbak, oh bentar ya. Itu download dua-duanya bang, taruh aja di satu file. Ini yang kan lu grafik normal sekarang, lu pencet yang potato. Potato itu yang kayak gini nih. Tapi kalau mau jadi ke normal, pencet normal. Uh, Keluar dulu dari black desert-nya sebelum lu pencet. Ntar login lagi. Good luck. Sebenarnya potato ini cuma bagus buat PvP doang, karena semua tireni itu diratakan lebih, lu jadi bisa lihat musuh doang. Kalau normal ya grinding nggak gitu ngaruh-ngaruh banget. Kata lebih clean aja. Pagi kok, pagi. Udah berapa jam? Baru 1 jam. Baru sampai 1 jam kamu tuh bangun aku. Ini limbo pertama aku semenjak 2 hari yang lalu ya. Enggak deh, kemarin aku dapat dari saya. Kemarin, dari kemarin ya, semenjak kemarin. Limbo aku langsung jual jadi polosan. Ini 1 jam 1 B di bawah. Kok gimana kok guys di bawah 700? AP kamu berapa dulu, sama APDP kamu berapa, dan kelas apa? Warrior 295412. Warrior ya. AP-nya sih kurang ya. Coba Giant, Elvia Calpion Giant. Givin bawah sih bang, sumpah Givin bawah itu kayaknya udah paling chill deh. Ya mungkin nggak nyampe 1B, tapi 800-900 M dapat lah. DP nya kebanyakan sih, itu pakai nark ya. DP nya gede banget tuh, 412. Terus 95 kalau mau efisiensi mending di Givin bawah. Sama paling kalau lu mau party zone ya ulun, normal ulun. Oh rata duo. Ini DP nya tinggi banget. Ini ya apa? Kapotia ya, iringnya apa nark? Dosnya 5 juga bisa di S4S biasa, tapi emang duitnya kurang sih kalau di sana lebih ke RNG spot. Nah, kalau mau duit Givin bawah, Elvia Giant, Orc juga masih oke. Warrior Awakening ya, Succession. Awakening lah ya, nggak mungkin Succession, jarang banget orang main Succession. Givin bawah sih. Dosnya 5 kurang sih kalau lo mau nyentuh Degia. Degia sebenarnya duitnya paling banyak sih buat AP-AP segitu, tapi AP-mu kurang. Mungkin AP-mu sekitar 305 baru kamu nyoba Degia biar clearnya cepet. pakai kelas meta kamu udah bisa nyobain Suklan, Usa gitu. Warrior kayaknya kurang. Pakai LAN aja lebih enak, lebih comfy. Sekarang kok grind biar nggak cepet bosan apa kok? Dengerin lagu, minum kopi, nonton anim atau nonton drama gitu. Sambil dengerin podcast sih biasa gue kalau gue mulai bosan. Oh sama targetin lu punya goal di hari itu, lu mau grinding berapa jam, lu mau grinding berapa B. Biar ada ini aja. Wah, target aja. Kalau gua kan tiap hari kalau bisa sih gua grinding sekitar 5B. Di atas 5B itu ekstra, nggak kehitung jadi misalnya gua grinding 7B, bukan berarti the next day gua grindingnya cuma 3B. Itu cuma ekstra doang. Biar keep motivated lah. Sambil ngobrol di Discord kalau ada teman. Bikin goal sih tiap hari. Oh gue mau grinding ini, oh gue mau grinding itu, oh gue butuh ini butuh itu. Jadi ada agenda sendiri lah. Sambil dengerin podcast paling enak sih, lu dapat ilmu sambil lu grinding. Ya podcast ini apa, edukasi, jangan podcast kayak oh ada drama ini, oh ada drama itu, oh lagi ada kejadian-kejadian itu. Kayak misalnya lu mau turun berat badan, lu dengerin podcast fitness gitu, lagi mau prevent penyakit ini, nah, lu podcast tuh sambil dengerin aja. Jadi ini emang membosankan sih jujur sih, tapi gue enjoy aja. Karena kadang gue sambil learning gue dengerin podcast. Kalau temen gue biasa sambil nonton anim sih, dia ada 2 layar, gue cuma 1 layar jadi gue nggak bisa. Sama bagilah di dalam satu hari lu mau grinding, misalnya Pagi 2 jam, sore 2 jam gitu. Jangan sekaligus. Kalau sekaligus kadang lu cepet banget burnout nih. Kecuali kalau emang hari libur mau enjoy ya serah lu. Makanya gue jarang banget burnout. Kayaknya burnout gue paling cuma 2 hari 3 hari udah login lagi, login lagi. Kak ada IG nggak? Ada bang, tapi privat, keluarga only.
I was 86% correct on accurately predicting when an NBA team will be at highest risk of losing strictly based on the sleep.
Oh gosh.
Yes, and just 15 or 30 minutes can make a difference. So let's dive into just some very practical strategies to get the best sleep possible.
Dr. Shireen Ma is a renowned sleep doctor and performance expert
whose sleep optimization research has enhanced the careers of CEOs as well as athletes in the NFL, MLB, and Formula One.
and has provided life-changing expertise to companies like Nike, Under Armour, and Google.
For my elite athletes that I work with, sufficient sleep, it's a game changer. For example, we saw a 12% faster reaction time, a 9% improvement in free throws, and a 4% increase in faster sprint time. And when you experience what it feels like to be well rested, you never want to go back to getting insufficient sleep. And it doesn't have to be these big jumps.
I'd love to dig into that.
Okay.
So I have a shower, then I get straight into bed after. Is that good or bad?
Tweak the timing of your shower and your hot bath to just an hour or two before bed. It's hard to grasp how much of a difference this can make in your life.
What about sex? Does it have an impact on your sleep?
Ugh. Okay, so
Is there anything that I can eat before bed that won't disrupt my sleep but will get rid of the hunger?
there's a pre-sleep meal. For example, cereal on milk.
Cereal?
And the reason
Jam
why
segini
is
enak
because
PVP
I
kok.
read this fascinating
Oh, enggak juga.
this is a useful tool
Enakan
if
grinding,
you're a working
segini.
professional and you
Sepi.
need a little boost in alertness and performance. What you do is
Nggak minat sih aku PVP.
The Diary of a CEO raffle is about to
Enakan
close.
grinding.
Anyone that
Lebih
subscribes to the Diary of a
comfy.
CEO before we hit 7 million subscribers, which is probably going to be in a couple of days' time, you will be included in the raffle. And on the day we hit 7 million subscribers, we are giving away
Aku
a
terlalu
lot of
gila untuk
money
PVP,
can't buy
Bang.
prizes to all of you. So hit the subscribe button, get in before 7 million, and I'll announce the prizes and the winners in the comments below when we hit 7 million subscribers. Dr. Ma, what is it you do, and why is it so important in your mind that you do it?
Great question. So I am a sleep physician, but I spend a lot of my time and career trying to educate and advocate for people to prioritize sleep, right? This fascinating process that each of us does every single night. And
Cuma
arguably is
jam
about a third of
segini
our
yang dapat
lives.
spot-spot
But
kayak gini
many
sepi.
individuals don't do this very well, or they sacrifice it and overlook this area. I very much believe if you don't sleep your best, you will not be your best. Or counter to that is if your sleep is best, you will be at your best. And what that means, if I unpack that a little bit more, is we often are sacrificing our sleep. We're underslept. We often don't have good quality sleep. We're very reactive to our sleep at nighttime, and it's the last thing that we think of at the end of the day when we wrap everything up. And that's arguably not going to put ourselves up to be the best we can be in the following day, right? And for my elite athletes that I work with, when you actually get sufficient sleep, you have practices that you plan into your day, and you actually are more proactive with that, it can be a game changer. And for them, when it comes to performance on the field, that can be the difference of a 9% improvement in free throw shots. It can mean reacting 12% faster. And so until you experience that, it sometimes is hard to grasp how much of a difference this can make in your life. But it is one of the foundations that will impact everything about how you function, your mood, how you feel, and ultimately perform the following day. If I could offer you, or yes, you specifically, Steve, if I could offer you something that's free and healthy and safe, that's going to help you think more clearly, make better decisions, be in a better mood, be more productive and efficient, would you want it?
Of course. How much?
Exactly. And so it's really a decision of whether you want to invest your time to be able to be more proactive with this particular area of your life to get the benefits that come down the road.
Who do you work with? Give me a sort of broad spectrum of the individuals, organizations that you've worked with on sleep, and why have they come to you?
I have had an opportunity to work with a number of professional sports teams and athletes, as well as organizations over the years, to try and apply the science into practice to help them improve their sleep, their scheduling, and their travel. So for example, I've been with the San Francisco Giants in Major League Baseball. I've worked with NBA teams like the Golden State Warriors, NFL teams like the Philadelphia Eagles. I won a Super Bowl ring in 2017 with them, to other sports organizations like Nike and Under Armour and ESPN to try and show how you can predict when NBA teams will lose strictly based on the schedule and insufficient sleep opportunities. To individual athletes who recognize, hey, this is an area that I am not optimizing, and I know this can be such a valuable asset to extend my career, to prevent injuries down the road, and to help me be at my best.
Do you ever work with CEOs?
I do. I do work with executives and C-suite executives to try and help them be their best, because they too are high performers, right? Their performance outcomes are maybe a little bit different than pro athletes, where we're quantifying on-field performance and looking at their swim times and what they're doing when it comes to the on-court or on-field performance outcomes. But for these executives, they arguably are also making incredibly important decisions. They have to still react when they're under pressure, and they have to make good judgment calls. And so many of the things that I coach and try to recommend to my elite athletes are very much applicable to the C-suite executive or even just the working professional.
That's really what I found so fascinating about your research and your work, is that although there's a focus on athletes, as someone who is also traveling, is also very, very busy, also struggles with sleep sometimes because I have to perform late at night, whether that's on stage or with meetings or whatever it might be, I resonated with so much of it. And I also train in the gym pretty much every day if I can. And I've also noticed a correlation between things like injury in the gym based on how I'm sleeping and my quote-unquote sleep debt. But I want to confront two things. The first thing I want to confront is the misconceptions around sleep that you encounter over and over again. What are the big overarching misconceptions that stand in the way of people believing in and or implementing the advice that you give them?
I'll start with just this badge of honor that I really believe still persists in society, where you should get only 4 or 5 hours of sleep and should be able to perform at your best. And I think the tides are turning, and I do think that that is changing over the last several years, where there are more vocal advocates of elite athletes like the Tom Brady's, who say everything is around performance enhancement. I need to go to bed early so that I can wake up early and to be ready to go for the day. To the Simone Biles, who says I need to get 8 hours of sleep. And so I think that that is a badge of honor that is now shifting, and now it's going to become, well, if you're not getting your 8, 9, 10 hours of sleep, right, then you're actually at a decrement to yourself, and you're actually not going to set yourself up to be the best that you could possibly be, whether you're on the field as a pro athlete or whether you're leading an organization or trying to go after whatever it is that matters to you, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that's going to continue to shift, but I'm excited about it, because that's one thing. Until you experience that difference and that life transformation of what it feels like to be well rested, then it can be a game changer. You never want to go back to it again when you're getting insufficient sleep.
Are there any misconceptions around how to sleep and sleep hygiene and I know the quantities of sleep we need that also seem to stand in people's way of them getting a great night's sleep?
Bro, di dunia YouTube
Yes, I think that there is a misconception that everyone
tahu,
needs a
Bang.
certain amount of sleep. There's
Beda
individual
di gua masih
variability.
kuliah deh
So
dia.
the recommendation from the American Academy of Sleep Medicine and the Sleep Research Society, so two of our national
2018.
organizations here in the U.S., recommend minimally 7 hours of sleep. But that's the lower threshold.
17
You might actually need
Pas
8
gua
hours
masih
or
main
9 hours or more to feel
Kasih
well
live stream
rested.
sih.
Right, I personally feel terrible on 7 hours, and I much more need the 8 to 9 hours. And there's those in that individual differences. So you need to find what you feel well rested. You're able to function well at a high level during the day, and that will then be your individual requirement. So I think there's this misperception that everyone needs a certain amount, but you need to find what works for you. And it's all about small changes. So if you're not at 7 hours, I think you shared sometimes you're under that.
Oh, yeah, sometimes, yeah.
It's about 15 or 30 minutes more can make a difference. So if you're getting 6 hours, then I'm going to recommend getting 15 minutes or 30 minutes more every day for this 1 week. And then get 15 or 30 minutes more next week, so that you're building from, say, 6 hours of sleep to 6.5 hours. And you may not think that that's that much, but we can all do 15 minutes more, right? We're less scrolling or doing what we're wrapping up our day, but those 15 minutes add up, where that's the difference of like an A student to a B student. Or 11 minutes more sleep is the
Is it
difference.
actually?
of a B student to a C student in one of these studies.
Really?
Exactly. And then over the course of a week, 15 minutes will be almost 2 hours more sleep than if you didn't.
What was the study?
So this was a study done in high school students, but looking at the difference of how much they're sleeping versus their correlation to grades. And so that 15-minute difference was shown to be that A to B student, 11 minutes from that B to C student.
Oh gosh.
Yeah. So it doesn't have to be these big jumps, but small changes over time will add up.
The study I have in front of me here, which I printed out, also highlights the importance of sleep for everybody, but also specifically in this case for athletes. Can you walk me through this study and what you found in this particular study on the adult male basketball players
Yes.
and how you conducted the study?
So in this study, we looked at the men's basketball team, and we really tried to examine if we extended their sleep over 5 to 7 weeks, encouraging them to get 9 or 10 hours of sleep every single night to pay back what we call an accumulated sleep debt. Would we see any impact on performance outcomes? Specifically, would we see an impact on reaction time, their fatigue levels, and would we see an impact on their on-court performance, specifically free throw shots, three-point shots, sprint time? And these are measures that we would do after every regular practice. And over the course of those 5 to 7 weeks, we demonstrated that we saw a 9% improvement in free throws, a 9% improvement in three-point shots. We saw a 12% faster reaction time and a 4% increase in faster sprint time. And so these were, the quantification which was novel at the time was what was quite fascinating, because it wasn't that 1%. I think many elite athletes are trying to find every small way to adjust their training to get that 1% better, because in elite sport, that 1% can be the difference, right, of being at the top versus not. But this was arguably 9% or even double digits for reaction time, depending on the outcome. And so we've expanded that looking at other sports as well, but this was one of the first ones to show that it really potentially could have a significant impact on performance outcome for these athletes.
How much did they sleep more per night to get those results?
Yeah, so they did. So we did quantify objectively through a what's called actigraphy. It looks like a wearable nowadays, and then compared that also with what they thought they were getting. And so we did extend their sleep substantially over, I believe, an hour and a half compared to what they were getting prior to the study.
Because getting 9% more free throws or three-point shots or 12% better reaction time is, quite frankly, for some teams the difference between like winning a championship and not. Because I think about the Premier League often, which is soccer, I guess, football. Oftentimes, there's been leagues within my lifetime, there's been years in my lifetime where both teams have tied with the same amount of points, and one is won just on the amount of goals they've scored. They've just scored a couple more goals, so after 38 games, they both have the exact same points, and the winner is just the person that's scored like a couple more goals. But even you think of reaction times, you think of goalkeepers in soccer, their whole game is reaction time. So if you can increase your reaction time by 12%, it's really, really staggering.
It can be a game changer, and I think that's what has been so fascinating with some of the athletes or organizations and teams I've worked with who have made it to the most important games and those championships, because the hope is that you've invested not just the night before that championship game, but you've invested an entire season,
Good luck,
even
Obey.
starting in the off-season, on cultivating
Thank
better
you.
habits to give yourself that foundation and be able to leverage these strategies that the other team is not, because we know that it significantly can impact not just the individual level on performance outcome, but organizations as a whole. And I think one example of that is I partnered with ESPN to do what's called the NBA Schedule Alert Project, where they asked, can you predict, Dr. Ma, when NBA teams are going to be at risk of losing games strictly based on the schedule? So not factoring in strength of team, but based simply on their schedule, where they're traveling to, how many time zones they're crossing, these various factors. Does it affect organizations as a whole and teams and their game outcomes, as you mentioned? And over 3 seasons, I was 76 to 86% correct on accurately predicting when an NBA team will be at highest risk of losing strictly based on the schedule. So in the spirit of the project, we didn't factor in strength of team. But to me, that was staggering, because there's many other factors that maybe are not always considered to be as clearly important about this travel schedule up front, but hey, maybe these factors really do play an influence game outcomes in this way. And that's not the only thing that has obviously shown that organizations and teams as a whole will have differences in performance outcome. There's other studies like the Monday Night Football study that showed if you simply bet on a West Coast team when they play an East Coast West Coast matchup during night games, over 25 seasons, you'd beat the Las Vegas point spread 68% of the time. And so if you're able to predict with greater accuracy, then obviously there is potentially some gambling outcomes that could work in your favor here. But really being able to show that you would be able to benefit and predict better than what the spread will be between the two teams.
Sorry, is that because the West Coast team has gone? Who's traveled?
It doesn't matter. It simply matters that the West Coast team is playing the East Coast team during night games. So this can happen on the West Coast, it can happen on the East Coast. The reason why is because performance is enhanced in the late afternoon to evening, around 4 to 8 o'clock. In both scenarios, the body clock of the West Coast team, because they typically go out just the day before the game, it feels like they're on the West Coast.
Okay.
Right? So when you're a West Coast team and you stay there and the East Coast team comes out, the East Coast is 3 hours later. So what is a 7 o'clock game on a West Coast feels like a 10 o'clock game for an East Coast team.
Got you.
Same thing applies when the West Coast team goes East Coast. Even if it's a 7 o'clock game there, the West Coast feels like it's a 4 o'clock body clock.
Yes.
And so that special window of around 4 to 8 p.m. when world records are broken and performance in a 24-hour day is optimal. And that is leveraged then over those 25 seasons that the West Coast will have more favorable outcomes.
Got you. So in this study you did in 2011, published in 2011, one of the things I read as well is that players who had slept more in your study sprinted faster. I mean, quite dramatically faster as well, I think. From 16.2 seconds at the start of the study versus 15.5 seconds at the end.
Yeah.
Over what distance
Yes,
was that?
so that was from the baseline to half court to baseline to full court and back.
Okay.
So we chose a very standardized sprinting drill that they are familiar with, that we could replicate after every regular practice. As you imagine, not everyone on the team was participating in this study, and so they did this after every regular practice, and that ended up being a 4% difference in sprint time.
That is pretty crazy. Do professional teams know this? Do athletes know this? Are they aware of this, or is this something that's fairly new?
Some are aware, and I think the momentum is shifting towards more athletes, more teams recognizing that this is an untapped competitive advantage, that this is an area that they may or may not have implemented specific strategies or education or planning for when they travel. But I think the more forward-thinking organizations, teams, and athletes are starting to pick this up and starting to recognize that they can use this as a weapon, right? As a performance-enhancing drug, if you may, because it is safe, it's healthy, it's effective, and we know that it will be one of the only things that can give you these performance benefits. And those are the ones that are trying to leverage the science into application for optimizing, their sleep at nighttime.
Have you seen athletes, individual athletes, change and save their careers? When I say change, I mean change the trajectory of their career or save their careers because they focused on their sleep. And can you give me some examples of that?
Yes. Golden State Warriors' Andre Iguodala. He's someone who I work closely with. He came to the Warriors back in around 2014. He was already an all-star. He was 28 at the time, knew that his career was going to probably be sunsetting at some future time, but wanted to extend it as long as possible. But he knew he wasn't doing sleep best as possible. He was very open about sharing how he would stay up till the wee hours in the morning playing video games, would sleep for a few hours, go to practice, play for a few hours, come home and take a 2 to 3 hour power nap. And that was his routine for 10 years. And he said, how do I improve how I approach my sleep? I know that this is important as an athlete who wants to play in the league as long as possible. So I had the opportunity to work with him over several months to help him recraft how he approached his sleep, including a wind down routine, thought about some of his nutritional choices, tried to shorten his naps, time them closer to game time to give him the boost in alertness and performance, be able to manage a racing mind, and be able to have just a more proactive approach to his sleep. In a really neat way, the following season, the Warriors went to the championship for the first time in many years. They won. He came back with the finals MVP. He subsequently has won 3 more championships with them, so 4 in total, and extended his career for 10 years. When we made these changes, there was a quantification of a performance enhancement. So a third party quantified as he went from under 7 to 7.5 to more than 8 hours. He had a 3-fold increase in his 3-point percentage. He had a 8.9% increase in his free throw shots, which very interestingly is the exact same 9% that I showed in my man's basketball study that had the same 9% improvement in free throws. He had a 29% improvement in his points per minute, a 45% decrease in his fouls. And so, these numbers are pretty staggering, again, for someone who's already at the highest level as an all-star. And it's not to take anything away from Andre, but he has been very vocal about the difference this made as he changed these habits. He says it changed everything for him. And I think that that's, a very inspiring story of what it can mean to extend your career and be able to almost tap into this additional performance capacity that I think even he was surprised.
Let's be honest, it's the boring that makes you rich. And the most unbelievable way for generating wealth and long-term economic security is, and then once you do that, you can become a super tax avoider. That sounded awful.
Scott Galloway, one of the world's leading voices in business and finance, is back.
His mission is to help millions of people build incredible wealth and live a life of economic security.
If you're trying to build wealth, you want to lean into your advantages. Your advantages in your 20s are flexibility and time. So take risks, find your talent, not your passion, that has a 90+% employment rate. Or become an owner, not an earner, and develop an army of capital that goes out and kills for you at night. And then invest it.
What if you're not young?
Focus on the things you can control. One thing that is within your control is spending. But 98% of us will spend everything we get our hands on. It is very hard to have the discipline to take money that is within your grasp and invest it. And we don't appreciate the power of investing and compound interest.
My team bought a bucket of sand to illuminate the power of compounding interest. This is investing $1,000 a month over the course of 12 months, starting at the age of 25. If you left it and kept investing at that rate, by the age of 65, it would look like this.
And the young man who says, I have 500 pounds, I'm going to wait till I have $1 million before I start investing. The way you get $1 million is by investing that 500. And this notion that it's too late for me, I'm in my 40s, I'm going to ignore finances, bullshit.
So what is the setup step?
Let me make it easy. First thing.
Congratulations, Diary of a CEO gang. We've made some progress. 63% of you that listen to this podcast regularly don't subscribe, which is down from 69%. Our goal is 50%. So if you've ever liked any of the videos we've posted, if you like this channel, can you do me a quick favor and hit the subscribe button? It helps this channel more than you know, and the bigger the channel gets, as you've seen, the bigger the guests get. Thank you and enjoy this episode. Scott, you've written a book on wealth, money, finance. Why? And why does it matter?
This is kind of a memo to my 25-year-old self. I've been rich 3 times, and the first 2 times I lost it. And I didn't grow up with a lot of money. It's been very important to me. I think America, and mostly in Europe, but especially America becomes more like itself every day. And that is, it's a generous, loving place if you have money. It's a rapacious, violent place if you don't. I think economic security is really important. And I think there's a series of habits and character traits that can help you get to economic security. You know that study that you become the average of your 5 closest friends? Same body mass index, same politics, same sports team, same neighborhood. What they don't talk about is that amongst those 5 people, even if they're all making about the same amount of money, one will end up much more economically well off than the other 4. and I'm trying to understand the behaviors of that one person who becomes economically secure by the time they're my age without making a lot more money than their colleagues.
Do you think we're taught about money? Where did those people, that 1 in 5, where did they learn about money?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I think, so the honest answer is I don't know. What I would say sociologically is that rich people talk about money, and it's considered taboo for employees and middle class and lower class and women to talk about money. Like, you're told not to talk about your salary at work. Asymmetry of information will always benefit the person that has symmetry, that knows the information. The boss of a company knows what everyone's making, but he tells his or her employees not to discuss their salary because Lisa might find out that Bob is making 30% more for doing the same work. So there's a bit of a zeitgeist that tells people not to talk about money, that it's like talking about porn or that it's vulgar. And I think you need to start talking about money and maintain a certain level of financial literacy from a very early age. Because Roger Federer talks about tennis. If you want to be good at anything, most people want to be good at money. And to be good at something, you need to understand it. And to understand it, you need to talk about it. So I'm very transparent with how much money I make, what I do with it. But talk to your friends about mortgage rates. Talk to your friends about how much money they make, what they're doing with it, where they lost money. And people aren't transparent about it, especially, I think about men. We're supposed to be just like accidentally wealthy. And to ever talk about our financial problems is to admit that we're not ballers or that we're not masculine. And so I encourage people from a young age to start talking about money and understand it and be transparent about it.
Where did you learn about money? Because I think about my own life, and I think there's key moments of, quite frankly, luck.
Yeah.
Where I was exposed to information because I was invited into a room, physically, literally into a room, or I was, through no decision of my own, someone came into my life.
Yeah.
Or in my case, maybe one of the biggest blessings I ever had is when I went off, dropped out of university and pursued entrepreneurship, my brother decided to go be an investment banker for 11 years in London.
Yep.
And then when I had my first exit, he messaged me one day and said, hey, I'll manage your money and I'll quit my job and come work with you full time. And that's my older brother. So like, life gave me the greatest gift anyone could ever have been given.
That rings so true. So I think of three things as you said that. The first is, the smartest thing I ever did was being born a white heterosexual male in California in the 60s. Because it gave me unfair advantage. It gave me access to free education at the University of California, and access, 76% admissions rate. When I applied to UCLA, the admissions rate this year is 9%. I came of professional age in the 90s when the internet was coming online. So I sort of had these wins at my back. And also, just to be blunt, everyone that was raised in capital looked, smelled, and felt like me. They were all white heterosexual males. And I didn't even realize at the time what privilege or unfair advantage was. So the first is just sheer luck. The second is environmental. I was raised by a single immigrant mother who lived and died a secretary. And people who don't grow up with money, people who grow up with money just can't really truly empathize with what it's like to grow up without money. I felt as if there was this ghost following me and my mom around, constantly whispering in our ear, you're not worthy. Your mom fucked up, which means you aren't worthy. And so I very early decided that that economic security was really important to me. I want to be clear, you can't make a decision to be wealthy. A lot of it is luck. But I was going to be very committed. My goal in life from 0 to 45 wasn't to be a good person. It wasn't to save the whales. It wasn't to have strong relationships. It was to get economic security. So I started connecting the dots around money pretty early. And then along the lines of what you were talking about, my mom had a boyfriend. And people don't talk about this. You know how in certain dramas they reference a second family, where a guy has an entirely other family despite the fact he's married? My mom and I were that second family. Her boyfriend for 7 years was a wonderful man named Terry. Really nice to me, spent every other weekend with us, super generous to me. He was also married with another family. So we were that second family. But he was a good man, and he was actually a good role model for me. And one weekend, I was asking him, what is a stock? And I was 13, and he said, here's $200. He gave me 2 crisp $100 bills and said, walk down to one of those stock brokerages, those fancy stock brokerages in Westwood Village, and buy some stock. And if you don't buy it by Monday afternoon, or by the time I'm back next weekend, I'm taking my money back. So at 13, I marched down to Merrill Lynch, Pierce, Fenner, Smith, Was in the lobby. I was ignored. I got intimidated. I walked across the street to Dean Witter Reynolds, another brokerage. And this young guy named Cy Sero came walking out and said, "Hi, I'm Cy Sero." And he gave me my first lesson in the markets. And I bought 14 shares of Columbia Pictures.
At 13, he gave you a lesson in the markets.
Yeah, at 13. And every day, every weekday for the next 3 years, from Emerson Junior High payphone booth, I'd put 2 dimes in and call Cy. And he would say, "Close Encounters of the Third Kind is a hit," which means that Columbia Studios is going to make a lot of money, so people are buying more stock. And then I'd go into his office. I didn't have a ton of friends. And so I would just swing by Dean Witter, and he would always give me a lesson in the markets.
Had those two men not shown such generosity to you with their time and with that $200 bill, have you ever played out in your mind where you might be?
I think we all do that, like Sliding Doors, that movie. You know, it's like life is such a series of, I promised myself I was going to approach this strange woman at the Raleigh Hotel in the middle of the day who was sitting by the pool, who was sitting there with another woman and another guy. And without the benefit of alcohol, it's not easy to open, a conversation with a strange woman. And I walked out to get my car, and I said, I promised myself I was going to speak to her. I was very drawn to her, beautiful woman. So I went back in, I just rolled right up, and I said, "Hi, I'm Scott. Where are you guys from?" And this was at the Raleigh Hotel. Long story short, 18 months later, our first son's middle name is Raleigh, right? And what I tell people is that unless you're willing to take an uncomfortable risk, nothing wonderful is ever going to happen to you. I mean, a really uncomfortable risk. What you're doing here is an uncomfortable risk. It's public failure if it doesn't work. This podcast platform you're starting, most people aren't willing to take these risks. And a lot of this, not to get existential, a lot of this comes down to a huge unlock for me has been atheism. I think I have a very solid grasp of the finite nature of life. You're a young man, you're going to be my age in an instant. And the thing you're going to recognize is that, okay, in 30 or 40 years, everyone whose opinion you are worried about is going to be dead. And I have found that has been an enormous unlock for me, knowing that I'm going to, at some point sooner than I'd like, look into my kids' eyes and know our relationship is coming to an end. So I'm comfortable expressing my emotions, or more comfortable. I'm comfortable taking uncomfortable risks, knowing that if I call someone and ask them to invest, if I approach a strange woman in a bar and introduce myself, if I call an employee who I would never think would consider working for me, I'm not afraid of rejection, because I realize everyone I'm worried about being shamed by is going to be dead soon, and so am I. And so why wouldn't you live out life, or why wouldn't you live out loud? Why wouldn't you squeeze so much juice from this, lemon called life? It's really been an enormous unlock for me, because the reality, Steve, is that most people are not willing to take uncomfortable risks that might result in public shaming. It's embarrassing to get rejected to express interest in someone and be sort of rejected. It's embarrassing to try and raise money and be rejected. It's embarrassing to start a business and not have it work. The majority of people aren't willing to take those uncomfortable risks. And the reason why you get outsized return as an entrepreneur, the reason why you get outsized returns when you're willing to approach strangers and ask for mentorship, friendship, express romantic interest, is because you are willing to endure rejection. The most overcompensated people in any organization are the salespeople. In terms of how hard and how smart they are, how hard they work and how smart they are relative to their compensation, hands down the most overcompensated people that everyone resents are the salespeople. Because they are willing to get out a big spoon and eat shit. Do not call me again. Okay, so what you're saying is I should follow up in a couple weeks, right? That type of rejection, that type of risk, that type of public failure, 99% of people are not willing to endure. I ran for sophomore, junior, and senior class president in high school. I lost all 3 times. And based on my track record, I decided I should run for student body president, where I went on to, wait for it, lose. And it never really got in the way of my confidence. And that's the key. If you want, and unfortunately young men are told, don't try hard, or they feel like a loss of agency, or especially romantically, they're told be careful in terms of expressing romantic interest. And if you don't know the difference between expressing interest and asking someone out for coffee and harassing them, you've got bigger problems. But I think a lot of young men feel like their agency's been taken away. They feel like the game is rigged, so they're not trying. And quite frankly, they're spending too much time on a screen or in their home, so they're not putting themselves in a position to have something wonderful happen to them. And on a very basic level, I'm almost entirely sure that I can guarantee you that nothing really wonderful I mean really wonderful, is going to happen to you inside of your home on a screen. Your success is a function of your ability to endure rejection and increasingly how much time you spend outside of your house off the screen.
What if you're not young? Because what you described there, all of that was me at 18. I had just dropped out of university after going to only one of the lectures, and I had these 4 credit cards, which had about, I think, combined about £1,000 on them. I'd maxed them all out. My parents weren't speaking to me. I'm 3 hours away from home, roughly, up in Manchester. Oh, more than that, 6-hour round trip in Manchester. And I'm 18, I've got no kids, no mortgage, no nothing. And I'm in this room that I can't afford to pay for. So I was so clearly at the bottom with nothing to lose that every roll of the dice was a potential win. So I was rolling that one.
But you kept rolling.
Over and over and over and over again.
Yeah.
But I wonder sometimes, because there's probably going to be someone listening that's, 47, 3 kids, mortgage, comfortable job, just about cutting it every month, 1 holiday a year, experiencing the same dissatisfaction with their life, but they can't roll like I did when I was 18.
Look, the reality is when you have kids, everything changes. I think that probably the darkest moment for me, maybe personally or professionally, other than losing my mom, was the moment that was supposed to be the happiest, and that was when my first son was born. And you think that when this child's introduced to the world, it's going to be bright lights and angels singing. For me, I felt humiliation and shame and fear because I had made a lot of money, but I had gone all in, and this is a lesson from the book, The Power of Diversification. I'd gone all in on this one company, Red Envelope, which went public in 2002. It was an e-commerce company I started. And I thought, and had been taught by the venture capital community, that if you throw yourself at something and you're talented, and I thought, I'm a baller, I'm really good at what I do, you got to go all in, and I kept investing every spare dollar I had and threw myself at this thing. And then a strike at the port, a software glitch, and the credit crisis in 2008, our stock went from $7 to chapter 11 in like 3 weeks. And I ended up not being worth 10 or 12 million, but being worth negative 2 million, because I was one of those idiots that borrowed against their stock to buy more stock. And then my child has the poor judgment, my oldest, to come marching out of my girlfriend. And the first thing I felt was failure on a massive level. Like my first emotion when my son was born was, I have failed to live up to my core responsibility as a man, and that is to take care of my child. And it was just a really ugly emotion, and that's a lesson in the book, and that is the moment you aggregate anything resembling some sort of decent amount of capital, you want to look at it and you want to diversify like crazy. Because if I had just taken a little bit of money off the table and invested in index funds or in real estate or bonds, I would have been so much better off. But everyone's told, you can have it all, you can be successful if you just go all in, never give up. Well, actually, the market will trump individual performance every time. And last week, the investment I was most excited about, this healthcare tech startup, great CEO, tier 1 investors, elbowed my way into the deal. I put $5 million in. I found out last Friday it's a zero. It just didn't work. Zero, shutting down. But here's the thing, I never invest more than 3% of my net worth now in any one thing. So while it hurts, I have Kevlar in the form of diversification. So I took a bullet to the chest, knocked me off my feet, I get up, I was bummed out for an hour. That was it. Because I never go all in on something. And people are taught, especially young people, especially men who are more risk aggressive, go all in on something because the people who are the wealthiest people in the world kind of went all in on something. And what they don't tell you is the moment they have capital, they start diversifying like crazy. So you want to diversify. You don't need to find the needle in the haystack. You can buy the whole haystack. And especially, unfortunately, in the American economy, not as much in the UK economy, it continues to be up and to the right. And the S&P and the NASDAQ are sort of self-filtering mechanisms because they kick out companies that aren't great and they bring in new ones. They kick out Kodak and they bring in Salesforce. If I had learned that diversification when I was a younger man, I would have saved myself, and not only would I have saved myself a lot of economic harm, I would have saved myself a lot of mental anguish. So diversification, and that's one of the key components of my algebra of wealth, diversification, people don't recognize how powerful it is because it sounds boring, and you have people like Bill Ackman saying, it's not concentration, it's conviction, and then they beat on their chest, like, check out my shit. No, diversify. and get rich slowly. Because here's the thing, life goes so goddamn fast. Wow, life has gone slowly, said no one ever. Now back to your person who's 40, 45, they're gonna live another 40 years. They're probably gonna work another 30. You wanna lean into your advantages. Your advantages in your 20s are flexibility. You wanna workshop careers, find your talent, not your passion. Start saving a little bit of money. A little bit of money when you're young is a lot when you're older. Try and develop that savings muscle. $100 a month, $1,000 a month. Oh my God, $2,500 a month. If you can do that in your 20s, you're going to be fine when you're my age. Even if you don't go double platinum or sell a book or be a baller in business, you're fine. Your plan B is all set. That's your advantage when you're in your 20s is time. When you get to your 40s, your advantage is the following. One, hopefully you're in a relationship with a partner you can align with around financial objectives, your approach to spending, your approach to earning. You can see the runway. All right, I'm going to retire in 30 years. I need 15 to 25 times my nuts to be in the bank to retire. I spend about $120,000 a year. That 20 times that, I would need 2.4 million. Now, work backwards. How much would I need to save over the next 30 years to get to 2.4 million, assuming 8% a year? The landing lights are on. You can start to plan your life. I'm not going to get there. I can't save this much. I got kids in college. Okay. When do your kids go to college? Can you take that burn down to 80 grand by moving to Mexico City or Costa Rica or to St. Louis? But you have the advantage of knowing your path. Ideally, you have a career where you can make some money and start saving a little bit. Ideally, you have a partner where you can get alignment around working together to get that financial security. But most people in their 40s are under the impression their life is over. I mean, they're probably going to live to be over 100. And so you don't have 80 years, you only have 60 years left. But you still probably got another 30 years working and making money, and you kind of know what you need, right? So I think there's advantages at every age, but this notion that it's too late for me, I'm in my 40s, I'm going to ignore finances, bullshit. You just need to have an adult conversation with yourself.
Do you think it makes sense then to go kind of risk on when you're young and then go diversified once you're older? Because you just want to highlight that for people that are, like I was when I was 18, to kind of go all in and to make those big bets when you have nothing to lose. And the minute you have something to lose, whether that's your mortgage, you've got children to take care of, or now you've got wealth, to then go risk off. Is that the kind of approach you would suggest to life?
I think generally speaking, you can't be as risk aggressive when you have kids. When you're younger, look, if you screw up here, you're likable enough that you can probably find couches to live on for 2 years if you needed to. If you just got in over your skis, you could find a way to dance. When you're young, you can dance between the raindrops. I lived in New York. I had two roommates. When I started my business, my girlfriend paid our rent, and because I didn't have kids or dogs. There's just a certain level of responsibility and things you got to take care of as you get older. When you get a little bit older, don't go all in on anything. If you're going to start a business, use other people's capital, ring fence it. Don't get seduced into the worst thing that can happen in your 30s and 40s is you start a business and you start failing slowly. You just don't know. The worst type of business is one that gives you just enough green signals that you keep investing more time and more money. Red envelope, that's what people know me for. That's the worst thing that can happen to somebody because it failed slowly. It failed over 11 years. I started an e-commerce incubator in New York backed by Goldman Sachs, Maveron, JP Morgan. It was out of business in 8 months because of the dot-com meltdown. That's a blessing. The best thing that can happen is success. The second best thing is fast failure. The worst thing that can happen to you is slow failure. You can't have slow failure in your 30s and 40s. So you want to make sure that if you go in on something, you ring fence it. I'm leaving my job. I'm going to try and start my own business. I'm going to spend 2 years doing it. A certain amount of capital, no more than maybe 10, 20% of my capital. Because hitting a wall and failing at 50 is much more devastating than hitting a wall or failing at 25 or 30. You can get up again. You're fine. You can press the restart button a bunch of times. So you want to take advantage of that in your 20s and 30s and workshop a bunch of things. I'm not saying hop around. I'm not saying, oh, I don't love this, it's not my passion. No, that probably means it's just work. But if you're not making progress, if you're not making money, if you're not getting roles in films, if everything's just really hard, you're in a position at that age to say, you know what? I'm going to leave Milan and move to Munich, or I'm going to Dubai. You have flexibility when you're young. You have geographic flexibility. Lean into your advantage. It's a heck of a lot easier right now to make money in Dubai than it is in Caracas, right? You'd rather be good in a great economy than outstanding in a mediocre economy. You have geographic flexibility. Lean into your advantages, your flexibility, your ability to recover, your ability to workshop.
What would you do if one of your sons said to you, how many sons have you got now?
I got 2.
You got 2 sons.
That
So
I know of.
one of your sons comes to you and says, Dad, I would like to be I've read your book, all of your books, and I think they're great, but Dad, I would love to be a professional actor.
Yeah.
And then your other son came to you and said, I want to be a musician.
I don't want to crush anybody's dreams. Go for it. I'll be supportive. But this industry, let's just look at the economics. Musician and acting has a 99% unemployment rate. So you got to be in the 1%. And I want you to set up benchmarks for determining what it means to be in the top 1%, right? The most talented actors in the world are in a union called SAG-AFTRA. And by the way, it's not easy to get your union card. You got to be in a Broadway play. You got to be recognized. That's a big moment. It's like getting your PGA Golf Tour card, right? You get your SAG-AFTRA card. It means you're one of the 180,000 most talented creatives in the world. Last year, 83% of them didn't have health insurance because they didn't make more than $23,000. So you not only need to be in the top 17% just to have health insurance, you probably need to be in the top 10%, realistically the top 1%. I know a lot of working actors. If I said, this is the guy from this show, you'd be like, oh my God, that guy's amazing. He's not making a lot of money. I mean, everybody talks about Tom Cruise. The majority of working actors, you would say, oh, I know that woman, I know that man, they're great. They make an okay living. If they had achieved that level of excellence in almost any other industry, they'd own a house and a second house in Ibiza. So if you want to be an athlete, an actor, a model, an artist, open a restaurant, open a nightclub, have a jewelry line, be a fashion designer, I don't want to crush anyone's dreams. But let's have a sober conversation that if you aren't getting bright green lights that you're in the top 1% really quickly, and we put some guardrails on it, we're going to do this for 2 years, 3 years, can't pay your rent in 2 or 3 years, Dad's going to stop paying your rent at some point, or maybe I'll continue to pay your rent, but I need you to start workshopping another career. Because here's the thing, young people oftentimes mistake their hobbies for their passions. And what I would suggest is, and what I can guarantee you, is being successful at anything, passion comes from mastery. Mastery comes from being a ninja at something. I'm renovating a house, and there's this guy installing our soapstone, who's the soapstone guy. He's an Iraqi immigrant, dropped out of high school. He knows everything about soapstone. He can talk to me about the vein in the soapstone and which quarries. And I've been very open with him. I've talked about my book. He made 1.3 million pounds last year. He's the soapstone guy. I can't imagine when he was a kid, he and I bonded over football. I would bet, I don't know this, I would bet he dreamt of being a football star and playing for Iraq in the World Cup at some point. I doubt at the age of 17 he thought, I'm hoping in 15 years I'm installing soapstone and renovations for American douchebags in Marylebone. I can't imagine that was his dream, right? But here's the thing, he has an amazing life. He takes care of his kids. He takes care of his parents. He gets to take amazing vacations with his wife, which makes him passionate about soapstone. So yeah, go be a fashion designer. But let's be honest, if you're not making enough money to pay your rent within 2 years, and you're not making enough money to, say, form a family in 5 years, we're going to workshop something else.
This requires such a mindset shift in the current world, because obviously the slot machine, the casino, the Las Vegas of validation is Instagram and TikTok. Now, if I announce on Instagram that I'm a tax lawyer for the next 10 years...
Not a great Instagram.
It's not going to increase my chance of getting laid either. But if I say that I am, I don't know, if I say that I'm part of Chelsea Football Club, I'm in the junior academy,
yeah.
Or if I say that I'm starting a business, I'm probably going to get laid more in the next 10 years.
Well, the only pushback I would get is that you have to be one of the 10 best soccer players in the world that year to play for Chelsea. That is really hard. That means you're the best player in Senegal, and then you just have to be godlike talented. The best 10% of tax lawyers, that's tens of thousands of them, fly private and get laid more than you think because they fly private and they can find someone and give them a wonderful life. So, I mean, look, in a capitalist, I'm not saying this is how the world should be. I'm saying this is how the world is. Economic security provides you with all sorts of opportunities for experiences, for relationships, for romantic opportunities. And it is sexy to be great at anything and get economic security from anything. And I can't tell you, I love taking care of my kids because at one point I was worried about my ability to take care of my kids and not worry about it. And this is where happiness comes from. It's great to be in a prestige industry and be a baller. I get reward from some of the fame I have right now. I'm sure you get reward from it. But the thing that is really rewarding as you get older is I can lean into my relationships with my sons, and I don't have that economic fear I had the first time my son came marching out of my girlfriend. That is so rewarding. I can take care of my dad. I don't have to worry about it. My dad's 90, gonna be 94 in a few weeks, and he lives in a really nice home. He has a full-time kind of health aide, and it's about $250,000 a year to take care of my dad. And if you look at, okay, that's post-tax, there's no tax credit for it. So it's about $400,000 in pre-tax income. My sister, who does really well, but not as well as me, we have a great partnership. She handles it logistically, I handle the money. And being able to do that and not have it be a source of stress in my life and know that my dad is taken care of well, okay, it'd be great to be a football player. Trust me, when you get to my age, that feels really good. That feels really nice. And the means to the ends, money is a means. It's really important. It's hard to be happy in a capitalist society with economic stress. The resting blood pressure of kids in low-income homes is higher than kids in middle and upper because they sense the anxiety from mom and dad. I remember, losing my jacket when I was in the 8th grade, and it was going to be just a horrible day because I had to go home and tell my mom jackets cost $33. All in my head, very upsetting. The ability to take care of your kids, your parents, do wonderful things. Money affords you so many wonderful things that getting to a certain level of economic security is the means. But the ends, the reason you get to economic securities is so you can free up and be free of anxiety and have some additional time so you can focus on the ends. And the ends is deep and meaningful relationships. I spend the majority of my money on travel and experiences with my family and friends. I spend a shit ton of money, and I absolutely love it. There's no reason to hoard money. Once I hit my number 7 years ago, and I start thinking, I could be a billionaire.
What was your number?
My number was 100 million. Mm-hmm. By the way, my number when I got out of college was $1 million. And then by my 30s, I thought, well, if I had 10 million, I'm done. And then things got so expensive, and my greed glands kept going, and my number was 100 million.
Why have a number? Why do people listening need to create a number? What's the value of having that sort of line in the sand?
Well, you need a goal, and you need to be thoughtful about how much money you're going to need. So if you figure out I'm going to need 80,000 pounds a year to live. The definition of rich is having a ton of shit and impress your friends. The definition of wealth is knowing that the passive income that you would get from growth from your stocks or dividends or incomes or rental income is greater than your burn. So you work out of option, or you work because you want to, not because you need to. That's the definition of wealth. So having a number is